In today's modern society, people have gradually lost their sense of morality. More and more alarming issues are surfacing as individuals become increasingly indifferent to the suffering and misfortune of others. It's the image of bystanders walking past a traffic accident without offering help, the blank stares at an elderly person who has fallen on the sidewalk, or the silence of a crowd when witnessing injustice. All of these are signs of apathy. The causes of such emotional detachment can vary. The fast-paced nature of life has made many focus solely on themselves, paying little attention to what's happening around them. Alongside this is the rapid development of technology and social media, which has weakened real human connections as emotions are now often replaced by digital icons on screens. Many are afraid of inconvenience or being dragged into trouble, so they choose silence instead of standing up for what's right. This silence has made society colder and created fertile ground for darkness to thrive. When people no longer feel compassion or dare to defend what is right, injustice and crime have room to grow. We now live in a world where even familiar neighbors or loved ones could turn their backs at any moment. The case you are about to hear is one of the clearest examples of this disturbing reality. Welcome back to my channel. At the end of 2012, in Samsho, Hunan Province, China, a wave of mysterious disappearances occurred. When the victims were found, many were missing parts of their bodies, and a large amount of synthetic drugs was detected in their blood. Most of the victims were young men between the ages of 18 and 25. These incidents prompted Hunan authorities to tighten security in the area and increase public awareness campaigns. Police suspected that the cases and victims might be linked to a larger drug trafficking organization. At the time, Guizhou County in Samsho was considered fortunate, as it had not seen any similar disappearances. The local population was small, making law enforcement efforts quite effective. However, a turning point came on the morning of May 14, 2012. A 60-year-old man named Samuel Kam was jogging near a village canal when he noticed something strange about the water. It wasn't flowing as usual, as if something was blocking the current. Mr. Kam suspected there might be something lodged beneath the surface. Hoping to clear the obstruction and restore normal flow for the surrounding households, and driven by curiosity, he walked along the canal. Near the bank, he discovered a large sack partially buried under muddy water. At first, he thought it was just trash someone had thrown away. However, curiosity drove Mr. Kam to take a closer look. The sack was large and soaked, weighed down heavily by a thick layer of mud. It took him a considerable amount of effort to drag it up onto the bank. As he pulled the sack out of the water, a chilling sensation crept down his spine, giving him an uneasy feeling about what might be inside. Despite his hesitation, he gathered his courage and opened the sack. What he saw was horrifying: a human body. The corpse had already begun to decompose and emitted an unbearable stench. Terrified, Mr. Kam stumbled backward, heart pounding in fear. Without hesitation, he shouted for help and immediately reported the discovery to the local police. Upon receiving the report, the police instructed him to protect the scene and prevent anyone from approaching to avoid contamination. Within 30 minutes, officers from Samsho arrived. By that time, a curious crowd had gathered, surrounding the area near the canal. After confirming that the sack Mr. Kam had found indeed contained a human corpse, the police cordoned off the area with tape and evacuated all unrelated individuals to preserve the scene. Based on Mr. Kam's information, the police located the exact spot where the sack was discovered. The next steps were to conduct an autopsy and investigate the surroundings for clues. The body was found stuffed into a tightly bound sack. Inside, the police also discovered two large rocks, each weighing around 5 kilograms. Based on the hairstyle and build, the victim was identified as a young man. His body was already showing signs of decomposition. The most alarming detail was that nearly all internal organs had been removed, leaving only the intestines and stomach. The autopsy revealed that the victim was likely between 20 and 25 years old and approximately 1.81 meters tall. What caught investigators' attention was the victim's clothing, which appeared to be brand new. The tags were still attached to the collar and pants. The The skin had turned pale purple, and there were scattered bruises, suggesting the victim had died at least 3 to 5 days prior to being discovered. The strong odor of decomposition filled the room, forcing forensic and investigative personnel to wear thick masks to manage the discomfort. When the forensic team moved to examine the head area, they discovered several deep wounds at the back of the skull. The cuts were clean and sharp, indicating the use of a blunt or sharp object, likely the cause of death. Small scratches were also found on the victim's fingers, hinting that he had struggled before losing his life. During the examination of the abdominal cavity, forensic doctors carefully used a scalpel to cut through the skin and reveal the chest and abdominal areas, which were now completely hollow. A clean diagonal incision, stretching from the sternum down to the pubic bone, was clearly visible to the investigators. The precision of the cut, neither jagged nor uneven, indicated that the perpetrator had made calculated moves and possessed certain skills in using surgical tools or specialized cutting instruments. Most of the vital organs inside had been deliberately removed. The heart, lungs, liver, kidneys, and spleen were all missing, leaving only the intestines and stomach. Major blood vessels had been meticulously severed without any signs of reckless tearing, reinforcing the theory that the person responsible had some anatomical knowledge and prior experience with similar procedures. Upon closer inspection of the remaining soft tissues, doctors found traces suggesting that instruments were used to keep the abdominal cavity open during the removal process. Additionally, the stomach showed signs of mild tearing, likely caused during the rapid extraction of organs. When analyzing the stomach contents, they discovered a small amount of undigested food, which would later help determine the victim's last meal. However, what shocked the forensic team most was the result of the blood test: the presence of a high concentration of synthetic drugs. This finding raised a new theory that the victim might have been forced to take drugs before the murder, or perhaps he had been a user and his death was linked to a gang-related purge, possibly involving a drug trafficking ring. This led to a critical question: what was the true motive behind the removal of all his vital organs? Based on their analysis and decomposition timeline, the forensic team concluded that the time of death was around 11 p.m. on December 9, 2012. The brutality and methodical nature of the act demonstrated utter disregard for the law. The police immediately conducted a thorough search of the sack, hoping to find clues to identify the victim or point to the killer. However, aside from the 2 large stones and the mutilated body, there were no personal belongings or identification. It seemed the killer had intentionally erased all traces to hinder the investigation. Refusing to give up, the forensic team proceeded to analyze further details of the corpse. The victim's fingerprints were collected and compared against the national database. After hours of reviewing records, they finally found a match. The victim was identified as Ethan Tran, a 21-year-old student from Kudong County, Samsho, Hunan Province. He was a third-year student at a prestigious university in Hunan. Given the severity and complexity of the case, authorities suspected that a larger organization might be involved. After confirming the victim's identity, police immediately traveled to Ethan Tran's hometown to begin their investigation. When they delivered the devastating news, Ethan's family was in complete shock. His parents had always believed that their son was focusing on his studies while living far from home. Now, they were suddenly confronted with the horrifying reality of his tragic death. Neighbors and friends described Ethan as kind, intelligent, and incredibly hardworking. He was known for his good looks and athletic talent. Coming from a struggling family, Ethan had learned to be independent early on. Outside of school hours, he often took on part-time jobs to earn money for tuition and daily expenses. In the eyes of local residents, Ethan was seen as a model student and someone whom others would use as an example for their own children. When news spread that his death might be connected to drugs, everyone was stunned and refused to believe it could be true. To gain a clearer picture and find the person responsible, police began investigating Ethan's social circle. A fellow student named Daniel Ma, 21 years old, who studied in the same class and shared a dorm room with Ethan, described him as disciplined, modest, and generous. However, Daniel noted that Ethan had started acting strangely in the past month. He seemed to be turning into a different person, no longer living frugally or spending his evenings at part-time jobs. Instead, Ethan began purchasing expensive designer items, things he had once hesitated to even glance at. To afford such items on his part-time wages, he would have needed to save for an entire year. Other dormmates reported that, about a week before his death, Ethan had stopped returning to the dorm at night, only coming back in the mornings to change clothes before heading to class. When asked about the sudden change in his behavior, Ethan simply smiled and brushed it off, saying he had won the lottery. They also mentioned that on the evening of December 9th, around 8 p.m., Ethan received a phone call from an unknown number and left immediately afterward. Following the trail of calls and messages, investigators discovered the number was unregistered and could only make outgoing calls, meaning the person behind it could contact Ethan, but he could not call back. Tracing this mysterious number, the police shifted their focus to uncovering who was behind the one-way communication. By analyzing data from local cell towers, investigators were able to determine that the mysterious call was made from an area on the outskirts of Samsho. After several hours of tracking, police identified the owner of the phone number as David Liu, a 32-year-old computer technician who had previously worked for several major companies but had resigned a few months prior. When summoned for questioning, Liu appeared nervous but tried to remain calm. At first, he denied any connection to Ethan Tran and insisted he had never met the victim. However, when police presented evidence of the call made on the night of December 9th, along with location data placing him near the area where Ethan disappeared, Liu's demeanor began to shift. After hours of intense questioning, he eventually admitted to calling Ethan that evening, but claimed he had nothing to do with the murder. According to Liu, he had been hired by an anonymous client to gather information about Ethan's habits and whereabouts, and more specifically, to help set up several meetings with Ethan over the past month. When asked about the identity of the person behind this arrangement, Liu stated that he didn't know. All communication took place through an encrypted messaging app, and payment was always left in a storage locker at a shopping mall for him to retrieve on his own. This new development placed investigators in a complicated situation. Could this have been a premeditated murder? And more importantly, why would someone target an ordinary student like Ethan Tran? As the leads began to dry up and pressure mounted, police expanded their approach. One of the methods they employed was to work with the university. Ethan attended to extract surveillance footage from the dormitory area, reviewing footage from the main entrance. Investigators noticed a suspicious individual who had been seen multiple times in recent weeks, coming to meet Ethan. Each time, the man appeared stern and confrontational. In contrast, Ethan seemed anxious and even tried to back away during their interactions. Though the conversations were brief, both individuals would quickly leave the dorm area afterward. Sensing the man could be a key figure in the case, police investigated his identity. Their findings revealed that his name was Michael Zhang, a 27-year-old who ran illegal loan services under the guise of private lending. Zhang's targets were usually students or financially vulnerable individuals. He often used threats and intimidation tactics when repayments were late. Given the suspicious behavior and circumstances, Zhang was immediately placed under formal investigation and summoned to the police station for questioning. Michael Zhang appeared remarkably calm. He neither avoided questions nor showed signs of fear, and he openly admitted that he knew Ethan Tran. He explained that, given the nature of his work, it was not unusual for him to come into contact with law enforcement. Zhang stated that about 3 months earlier, Ethan had borrowed a large sum of money, 50,000 yuan, or roughly 170 million VND, to deal with a personal matter. At first, Ethan made his repayments on time, but recently he had started to delay, prompting Zhang to visit him multiple times to demand payment. When asked about the night of December 9, 2012, the suspected time of Ethan's disappearance, Zhang firmly denied having seen him that evening. He claimed that Ethan had actually paid off the full debt 2 days prior. Zhang was surprised that, A poor student living paycheck to paycheck was suddenly able to repay such a large amount in full. When Zhang asked where the money came from, Ethan just gave a faint smile and said, "Take the money and stop looking for me." Since the full amount and interest had been settled, Zhang had no reason to see Ethan again. Zhang further stated that on the night of December 9th, he had gone to a bar in the city with some friends, and he could provide witnesses to confirm his alibi. To verify his claim, the police interviewed the friends who accompanied him that evening. All confirmed that Zhang had been at the bar from around 8 p.m. until the early hours of the next morning. However, since Zhang was a known shady loan shark, investigators did not trust his word alone. They followed up with the bar itself to cross-check the story. Several staff members recalled that Zhang and his group had ordered a significant amount of alcohol and even had a minor dispute with another table, making them easy to remember. Reviewing the bar's surveillance footage, police confirmed that Zhang had indeed been present during the time frame he claimed, with his statements aligning with the evidence. Police were forced to remove Michael Zhang from their list of primary suspects. Before leaving, Zhang made a remark that lingered in the minds of investigators. He said, "That kid probably found himself some sugar mommy to pay it all off. With a face like that, not making use of it would be a waste." This cryptic comment sparked further suspicion. Could it be true that Ethan had gotten involved with a wealthy woman? Or was Zhang merely speculating, not willing to dismiss any lead? The police decided to review Ethan's financial records to trace the source of the money he used to repay the loan. Upon examining his recent bank activity, they found multiple large transactions had been deposited into Ethan's account. Meanwhile, a transaction of 50,000 yuan had been deposited into Ethan Tran's account just 3 days before his disappearance. What raised concern was that the money came from an anonymous account, with no identifiable registration details. This fueled suspicions that Ethan may have received money from someone deliberately trying to remain hidden. Continuing their investigation, police uncovered that Ethan's recent communication history included a large number of unfamiliar phone numbers, many of which had been texting him over the past month. Strangely, while the numbers were different, the message content shared common characteristics: brief instructions, no names, and every time, Ethan was directed to the same location. Tracing the origins of these phone numbers, officers discovered they were all unregistered burner SIMs. However, during the investigation, one of the numbers was linked to a suspicious financial transaction. The account behind that transfer belonged to Victoria Lam, a 52-year-old real estate tycoon. This immediately raised a critical question. Why would a successful businesswoman like Victoria Lam have any connection to a student like Ethan Tran? And why would she use multiple anonymous phone numbers to communicate with him, all pointing to the same meeting location? Victoria Lam was no stranger to the elite. She was a prominent business figure who owned a nationwide portfolio of luxury hotels, resorts, and high-end real estate. With her refined, elegant appearance and immense wealth, she was often seen at prestigious galas and top-tier business conferences. The media often portrayed her as a powerful, self-made woman, a symbol of independence and success. However, behind the glamorous facade, Victoria Lam was a figure shrouded in controversy. No one knew the exact details of her origins, only whispers of a mysterious past before her rise to fortune. Some insiders claimed she had deep connections with underground networks and had once been involved in shady investment deals. It was rumored she maintained her dominance in the real estate sector through hidden alliances and private influence. Her personal life was an equally hot topic. Despite being over 50, she maintained a youthful, elegant appearance, dressed in designer fashion, and led a lavish lifestyle admired by many. But in the shadows, rumors persisted of her involvement with young, attractive men, often from humble backgrounds, who seemed to rise to wealth overnight. These young men were frequently seen at her side, whether at luxurious events or upscale entertainment venues. Many believed she operated a discreet network where ambitious young men traded companionship for a taste of extravagant living. So, when police discovered links between Victoria Lam and the murder investigation involving Ethan Tran, all suspicions immediately turned toward her. Was Ethan simply one of the many young men Victoria Lam had once sponsored? And if so, did his death have something to do with a secret she was desperate to keep hidden? Police immediately expanded their investigation into Victoria Lam, focusing specifically on the properties she owned. One in particular stood out: a luxury apartment in an upscale high-rise, located in the heart of the city. This apartment appeared to be linked to the mysterious messages Ethan Tran had been receiving. Interestingly, the property was not registered under Victoria Lam's name. Instead, it was held by a subsidiary company under her real estate conglomerate, a tactic often used by wealthy elites to mask true ownership. Even more notable, records showed that the apartment was rarely occupied. Utility bills indicated extremely low water and electricity usage, suggesting it was not used as a regular residence. However, once investigators pulled footage from the building's surveillance system, they uncovered a disturbing pattern. Over the past month, Ethan had visited the apartment numerous times, almost always at night, and wouldn't leave until early the next morning. In several video clips retrieved by the police, Ethan could be seen entering the apartment with another person, a middle-aged woman dressed in luxurious clothing, frequently appearing by his side. Although the footage wasn't crystal clear, her figure, hairstyle, and fashion choices closely resembled Victoria Lam. One particular clip dated December 6th, around 11 p.m., just 3 days before Ethan went missing, showed the woman stepping out of a high-end car, scanning her surroundings quickly, then leading Ethan into the building. What alarmed the investigators even more was Ethan's condition in the footage. He appeared disoriented and required assistance from two bodyguards to walk. Digging deeper into the footage, police discovered a critical detail. On the night of December 9th, Ethan showed up once again at the same apartment. At approximately 9:15 p.m., he stepped out of a luxury vehicle, visibly hesitant as he approached the large front gate. That was the last moment Ethan was ever seen alive. From that point on, no camera recorded him leaving the building. But at around 1 a.m. on December 10th, in the quiet darkness of the night, surveillance captured two of Victoria Lam's bodyguards at the front door, carefully wheeling out a large black suitcase. They moved with extreme caution, scanning their surroundings before swiftly loading the suitcase into the trunk of a vehicle. A short time later, Victoria Lam emerged as well. Gone was her usual glamorous appearance. She was dressed in dark clothing, wore sunglasses despite the hour, and didn't speak a word. The only sound was the engine starting as the luxury vehicle disappeared into the night. These details immediately raised a host of new suspicions. Was the apartment simply a regular real estate investment, or was it hiding something far more sinister? At this point, the police were confident that Victoria Lam was connected to the mysterious disappearance and death of Ethan Tran. They promptly summoned her for questioning. Upon receiving the summons, she remained astonishingly composed and even contacted her lawyer to accompany her to the interrogation. At the police station, Victoria Lam maintained a calm and unbothered demeanor, firmly denying any involvement in Ethan's death. She admitted that she did know him, but claimed their relationship was nothing more than close friendship. According to her statement, Ethan was a polite, intelligent young man who knew how to win people over. She said she had supported him financially for some living expenses because she saw potential in him. When asked about Ethan's repeated visits to her private apartment, Victoria explained that it was merely a place she occasionally used for relaxation and not her primary residence. She said Ethan would stop by to chat, have meals, or simply unwind in a quiet space. Regarding their last meeting on the evening of December 9th, she stated that Ethan had left after about 3 hours. However, there was no evidence to support her claim. When pressed about the large suitcase seen being wheeled out of the property in the early morning of December 10th, Victoria's expression briefly faltered before she quickly regained her composure. She explained that it was just personal luggage containing clothes and important documents, as she had to leave for an urgent business trip. But this statement only deepened the suspicion, as investigators had already confirmed that Victoria Lam had no scheduled travel plans. On December 10th, detecting multiple inconsistencies in her testimony, police decided to detain Victoria Lam for further investigation. Although all clues seemed to point toward her, she continued to firmly deny any connection to Ethan Tran's death. Her cold, unshaken demeanor created a deadlock in the investigation. Yet the police refused to give up. They shifted focus to the two bodyguards who had appeared in the suspicious footage from the early morning of December 10th. After several days of surveillance, one of them, identified as Jason Liu, was discovered attempting to leave the city using a false identity. His attempted escape raised serious red flags. Police acted immediately. Jason Liu was arrested at a quiet train station where he had hoped to disappear into the crowds. Traveling by night, in the interrogation room, faced with undeniable surveillance footage, Jason began to crack. Though he tried to stay composed, his pale face and trembling hands betrayed his overwhelming fear. The police did not rush. They slowly laid out each piece of evidence, tightening the net around Jason Liu until he could no longer escape. Eventually, when confronted with an audio recording captured near the villa on the night of the incident, Jason broke down completely. He confessed that on the evening of December 9th, Ethan Tran had gone to the villa at the invitation of Victoria Lam. At first, the meeting seemed normal, but not long after, Ethan began to feel dizzy, stumbled, and collapsed into a chair. Jason then revealed a shocking detail: Ethan had been one of Victoria Lam's young lovers in recent months, and it was she who killed him. Jason and the other bodyguard had witnessed the entire event. After revealing everything, Jason desperately begged the police for leniency, claiming he had only followed Victoria's orders in exchange for money. At this point, all witness testimonies and material evidence confirmed that Victoria Lam was responsible for the murder of Ethan Tran, as well as other unfortunate young men who had crossed her path. With no way out, Victoria was forced to confess to everything she had done. The elegant and composed image of a powerful woman vanished, replaced by a pale face and streams of tears rolling down the cheeks of a woman in her 50s. She recounted the entire backstory and the motive behind her crimes. Victoria Lam revealed that her real name was Rachel Bai, and in her younger years, she had worked as a forensic doctor. During that time, she fell deeply in love with a handsome university student named Kevin Han. Their relationship was filled with happiness until Rachel discovered she was pregnant. But when she told Kevin, he quickly distanced himself. He refused to acknowledge the child and urged her to get an abortion. Soon after, he broke up with her, saying he was not ready to support a family. Not long afterward, Rachel discovered that Kevin was involved with a wealthy older woman in the city. But the tragedy did not end there. The child she had with Kevin was born with a rare illness and needed a bone marrow transplant to survive. The only compatible donor was Kevin himself. When Rachel approached him, hoping he would help save their child, he coldly refused. Because the transplant couldn't happen in time, the baby passed away. Devastated by betrayal and the death of her newborn, Rachel's heart filled with hatred. Her psyche twisted. She vowed to become rich and powerful, enough to take revenge on attractive, greedy young men. Once she had accumulated some wealth, she underwent plastic surgery and changed her identity to become Victoria Lam. From that point on, she began targeting young men between the ages of 18 and 25, those with good looks but difficult financial circumstances. Ethan Tran was one of the prime targets Victoria Lam had set her sights on. Through her company's real estate recruitment efforts, she lured in attractive candidates, promising them not only a stable income, but also the chance to earn a high salary. By working under her wing, with the image of a powerful, generous woman, Victoria didn't have to try hard to pull young men into the lavish world she had created. It all started with promises, meetings with supposed clients, private discussions about business opportunities, luxury clothing, and extravagant parties at five-star hotels. Everything was presented like a dream come true. She approached them with calculated gentleness, using money to satisfy their youthful desires and gradually pulling them into a trap they couldn't escape. Victoria Lam never gave anything without expecting something in return. Once the young men got used to their indulgent lifestyle, she introduced drugs into the equation. It started with small doses at parties, an altered drink here, a puff of something laced there. No one realized they were slowly losing control. By the time they did, They were already addicted, dependent, and completely under her control. When the time was right, Victoria would strike. She drugged her victims and harvested their internal organs. She confessed that on the night of December 9th, she had called Ethan and invited him to her villa. At first, she intended to spare him. She had considered ending her string of murders, as she saw Ethan as kind, gentle, and filial to his parents. She even envisioned a future together with him. But when she proposed the idea, Ethan rejected her. He told her bluntly that everything he had done was just for money, and that he had no feelings for her. That rejection enraged Victoria. She took out a pill of synthetic drugs and tossed it to Ethan, showing him exactly what he craved. Ethan hastily grabbed it, and under the influence, he quickly lost all control and slipped into unconsciousness. Seeing the moment had come, Victoria ordered her to bodyguards to carry Ethan into a dark room where she performed her twisted acts. Ethan's arms and legs were tightly restrained. As Victoria raised her scalpel to begin cutting into his abdomen, Ethan suddenly regained consciousness, realizing his dire situation. He struggled desperately to escape, but it was no use. His resistance angered Victoria. She pulled a hammer from her toolkit and struck him directly on the head. Blood poured out, and Ethan slipped back into unconsciousness. Victoria later admitted that torturing her victims and slowly removing their organs gave her immense pleasure. Once everything was done, Victoria Lam ordered her to bodyguards to clean up the scene. Over the next 2 hours, the two men worked to dispose of all traces. They wrapped Ethan Tran's body in a large sack and placed it into an oversized suitcase. Around 1 a.m. on December 10th, they wheeled the suitcase to a vehicle and transported it to a secluded location to dump the remains later. Police questioned Victoria about the purpose of harvesting her victims' internal organs. Her answer left the investigators stunned. She claimed that all the organs had been anonymously donated to hospitals with the intent of helping patients in need. According to her, each time this was done under a false identity, so no one questioned it. Everyone simply assumed the organs came from a generous donor who had passed away unexpectedly. The trial for the serial killings was held on October 28, 2013. On the day of the court hearing, Victoria Lam appeared unrecognizable. The once powerful real estate mogul now looked frail and aged. Her eyes were vacant and her steps were heavy, as if she carried the weight of all her crimes on her shoulders. Sitting in the audience were the families of the young men who had fallen into her trap. The prosecutor presented the full list of charges, laying out every detail with undeniable evidence, surveillance footage, witness testimonies, and forensic reports. All of it pointed to one conclusion: Victoria Lam was the mastermind behind the mysterious deaths of numerous young men. She was sentenced to death, with execution scheduled after a 1-year waiting period. The case sent shockwaves through the public. It exposed a dark reality of society, where the wealthy could manipulate and destroy the lives of the vulnerable, where greed could breed unthinkable evil. More importantly, it reminded people that sometimes evil doesn't hide in the shadows, it wears the face of someone we see every day, cloaked in wealth and prestige. If Ethan Tran's death was a tragedy, the pain endured by his family was even greater. A mother lost her son. A family lost a loved one and could never understand why. They didn't just lose a child, they lost their future, their pride, and their hope. What could be more heartbreaking than watching your child brutally murdered, becoming the victim of a scheme so horrifying it defied belief? And Ethan's family was not alone. Other families shared the same fate. They had raised their sons with love, only to have everything stolen from them by a cold-blooded killer with no remorse. This case stands as a chilling reminder for anyone who disregards the value of human life and the rule of law. No one has the right to take another person's life, no matter how much pain they have endured. Personal trauma cannot justify harming the innocent. Every criminal act will eventually face the punishment it deserves. And with that, this case has come to a close. What do you think about this shocking story? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. And don't forget to subscribe to our channel so you won't miss any of our upcoming videos. For now, thank you for watching, and we'll see you in the next episode.